Okay, so in this video, we're going to just start tracks from the get-go, starting from PCO, and work our way through importing the tracks, setting the pads, keys, etc. The first thing we're going to do is go in, open our template, and save it as a new set. So this has all of our MIDI cues that we've set up previously, and we just don't want to have to do them every single time, so we save it in a template. And in order for the collect all and save feature to work, we're going to have to save it in a new spot, preferably on our external hard drive to save the space on our own. The collect all and save feature is nice because we will be able to drag the entire project over to each of the campuses and they have everything they need and not have to load anything from scratch. You'll notice that I have each of my flags still on there so I don't delete them. I'm going to drag the first one all the way to the front. And since I know this song is in C, I'm going to navigate to the pads in the left-hand window and go to C and just drag it right in. After it's in, for some reason it sounds funny when I play it back, so I'm just going to unselect warp, and now I know that I have a 10-minute pad that will last at least the length of the song. And we can extend it when necessary. Okay, so this first song is Raise a Hallelujah in C, so what I want to do is I want to navigate over to the multi-tracks, which I've created ahead of time by adding a folder, and then going down and finding the folder window and dragging in the ALS file, not the top folder. And right off the bat, to maintain our sanity, we're just going to create a group folder for all of the group tracks. And you can do that by highlighting all of the inputs, hitting Command G, or right-clicking and going down to group tracks. Next, I'll do the same thing to the click and guide, and you're going to see me do that a lot. The hotkey is Command G, and I use hotkeys whenever I can just to make working very, very fast. Next, we're going to set the tempo for the song, and we need to do that in the native click, and I can see that it's 82. In order to get the click to count similarly to how we want, we need to double it. Now I'll just use a calculator. All right, it's 164, and I'm going to set the upper parameter for the tempo to 164 and drag it all the way to the top. That's just the quickest way to get it where I need to be, rather than dragging it up a little bit, down a little bit, until I get it just where I want. Okay, next we're going to move these files into place, and we can do that by selecting the bottom or top one, holding Shift and hitting the up arrow until they all have been selected, and now I want to drag them over perfectly on the line. You can see here that I did not do that, and it kind of messed up the track. So perfectly on the line, drag it over to roughly 5 minutes into the pads, so that way I can make sure there's enough time for the welcome. Label it 2, Raise a Hallelujah. That way it's still all synchronized with the MIDI pads. And next we can see that the pad doesn't extend long enough, so we're just going to copy and paste that and then perform a crossfade between them. We're going to cut off the fade out in the back end and cut off the fade out in the front, and then we're going to highlight between them by zooming in, highlighting the middle section, right-clicking, and hit Create Crossfade. Okay, so it's quite apparent that the key is incorrect on the actual tracks, but I know that the pads are in the right key of C. So I need to highlight all of the tracks that actually have some melody or notes. So I don't want to highlight the shaker and the drums because I don't want to change those. Highlight them all, select warp, go to complex, and find out how much up or down the tracks need to go in terms of semitones, and then literally just drag that little knob up or down by clicking it and moving the mouse up or down.
Intro, 2, 3, 4.
And I dragged the transpose in the wrong direction here, so it's a perfect example of having to go back down, and then even while it's playing, I can drag it up 3 semitones instead of down 3, and you can hear it lock right into place. And now that that's done, we're going to go to the end of the song. We're going to crop out the rest of the pad since the next song is not in C. And we're also going to drag the locator to the end of the song to start the connecting thought. Now for connecting thoughts, we'll have ended that pad, and we're going to start the pad for the next song, which is in B for O Come to the Altar. In addition, we'll make any tempo and time signature changes that are needed for the next song. That'll happen at the beginning of the connecting thought. This is done using the red line automation feature, which is done in the tempo. We'll figure out the tempo, multiply it by 2, and then make a selection on the red line, set the upper or lower parameter, and then drag to the next red dot all the way to the top or bottom directly above or below where the existing one already is. Next, we'll go through and actually grab the multi-tracks for "O Come to the Altar," get them into place, drag them to the very bottom of the project so that way they are grouped all in one section and it doesn't become confusing. I'll grab all the channels, I'll move them all over in a straight line so that way they stay in the same inputs. And I'll make sure that there's about 5 minutes for a connecting thought just in case someone talks a little bit too long. And I can do that real quick just by making sure that that 10-minute pad is split in half. As we're looking at these tracks and we can see that it's in B, we can see that the actual clips that we dragged in are not activated, and all we have to do is hover over them, select the 0 on the keyboard, and those will activate them if they are all loaded in. Occasionally they don't load in fast enough, and we're just going to have to go over them manually, and again hit activate or 0 on the keyboard. All right, now everything's loaded in, so we're going to go up and grab a locator and put it into place at the very beginning of the song. Specifically the number 4 one because I know it's already programmed. I'll also do some labeling just to keep the project organized. This one's the connecting thought. And the next one I'll label "O Come to the Altar." All right, now we're just going to double check the key. Looks like it's already in B, which means we don't have to transpose it up or down at all, so we don't have to go through, select the tracks, and warp them at all. But we do have to go and drag the pad in, so we'll go to our pads folder, bring it up, and add a new input by right-clicking, insert audio track, or relabel it pads. Again, just keep it organized and consistent. We'll put the clip inside the actual input track. And now we'll just zoom in and make that fade between the last pad and this one a little bit more smooth. So now we know it's going to end about here, so what we can do is just drag it back, highlight it, right-click, and create a fade out. So the same way that we would create a crossfade between two clips is the same way we're going to create a fade out or fade in. All right, we just want them to overlap a little bit here, so we're kind of creating a crossfade at the end of the day anyway, and it's never going to sound too great, but it's better than absolutely nothing. And here I'm just making sure the transitions into the connecting thought and out of the connecting thought into the next song are as smooth as they can be. Here I noticed that I accidentally placed the flag a little bit too far back, so if someone triggers the connecting thought, it'll actually go back a little bit too far and change tempo on them, as well as it not being the correct time signature for "O Come to the Altar." So I just right-click on that, select Insert Time Signature Change, and type in whatever time signature I would like. This song is in 6/8, but in order for it to count the way that we would like it to, it's going to be in 3/4 instead.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
All right, so we'll drag this flag back to start at the actual beginning of the song. So if they trigger it, it'll actually get the intro counted and all the other elements of a fade in of a song.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
As with the other songs, we'll group all the tracks and name them appropriately.
Verse. Verse.
All right, now we can see that this pad isn't long enough, so we're just going to copy it and paste it. Again, cut off the fade in and fade out. Then overlap them a little bit, highlight both of them, and then create a crossfade. All right, I'll get all these flags out of the way. And finally, our last song is Holy is Our God, which is in A. That also means we'll need to shorten up this pad, which flows underneath. First, I'll drag in the A into the top input channel, pull the B one back, and do the same thing that I did the last time, and create fade ins and fade outs for each of those individually. It's one thing to just look like you're doing it right, but it's another thing to make sure it sounds good. So always make sure whenever you're making these changes, make sure they actually translate. Now this song is fading out a lot sooner than the clips are making it seem to appear, which is important why we do actually listen back to it, and so we can actually bring these pads way farther back so it sounds like a smoother transition in the audience. And all I did to delete them is just highlight them and then hit the delete keyboard button. And again, we'll just make sure there's a little bit of overlap for these pads. And just to make sure that I didn't accidentally cut off anything really dramatic, we're going to create a fade out on the entire song. So what we do is we just open up one of them, or else it doesn't seem that I actually get that fade out right click option. So I just open up the drums real quick, right click it, and even though I'm only selecting that one, all of the other ones are highlighted, so it's going to fade out all of them at one time. All right, it seems this next song is Holy is Our God at 68 BPM. We'll multiply that by 2 to get our BPM for Ableton, which is 136. And we're just going to go in, again, set that lower parameter, make a selection on the timeline, and make the automation change. Now grab the ALS file, drag it into the bottom of your project, scroll all the way back to the beginning to select all the clips. I can select the first one, hold down shift and select the last one. It'll select everything in between. And I'll just zoom out to make that drag a lot faster. And since there's no connecting thought or anything like that in between, this song is going to overlap with the one before it, in this case, Oh Come to the Altar. And as I'm zooming in here again, I can see that a few of the tracks haven't loaded properly and need to be activated by being selected and hitting the 0 key. But before I do that, I'm just going to drag this song roughly into place so the fade out from the last song goes right into the click and guide intro on this new song. It's important to do that because the band doesn't actually play till they count in, and the instrumentation from the last song needs to overlap.
2. Intro. 2, 3, 4.
All right, that sounds pretty good. So before I get too far though, I'm going to organize these tracks by highlighting all the input channels, hitting Command G, creating a group and renaming it. In addition to right clicking and hitting rename, I can also hit Command R to shortcut. And I was a little overzealous in creating that tempo so far back, so I'm just going to drag each of those automation points forward, being careful not to drag them up or down and create any changes in the tempo. I'll make sure the locators are correctly named, so that way it's easy for the drummers to select the song in practice.
1, 2.
Again, I'll just go back
Intro,
and
2,
make sure the transitions
3,
between the songs
4.
are good.
1, 2. Intro. 2, 3.
I know this next song is in 4/4, but it's still counting in 3/4 from the last time I changed it. So I need to go right above the locator for Holy is Our God, right click, add time signature change, and manually write in 4/4.
1, 2, intro, 2, 3, 4.
Alright, so I'm hearing a little bit of crackling once I'm unmuting all these channels, which is
Verse
why
1.
it's so important just to listen through your tracks all the way through to hear if there's anything strange like this. I know that it's coming from one of the keys just because I unmuted those and activated those by hitting 0 and then it appeared. So I'm just going to listen to them one at a time until I hear the crackling, which I can do by hitting that little S button, which solos out each individual track. It's tedious, but any little crackling you hear in your headphones or your speakers is just going to be magnified that much more when it's playing through a PA in an auditorium. Now, I don't know why it's this way. It could have been a load-in problem, but I don't really care that much because the result is the same. I need to get in there, delete it, or fix it. Based on the fact that I'm not hearing it through the rest of the song, it may have been an issue on recording or when whoever exported these tracks originally had an issue with their computer clock.
3, 4.
All right, let's find out what is next on PCO. All right, we can see the celebration is next, but we're also going to use this part of the tracks to play behind the gospel. So we're going to make this section super long, probably around 20 minutes or so, depending how long our pastor decides to present the gospel, or if we go out a little too soon and we're playing for a little bit longer than expected, we're adjusting for that and we're not having to make on-the-fly changes. We'll bring this locator into place, right-click it, rename it, and call it celebration/gospel. And now we're just going to go up, go into the pads, and then just make a whole bunch of them. I'll just quickly go in and crossfade between each of them, so that way it's one smooth pad. And again, we use the pads just to fill in that extra space where there's no tracks, or if we're playing behind something and the band hasn't completely faded in yet, something's going on and it feels a little bit less uncomfortable in the auditorium. All right, we'll zoom back out and we can see that there's 3 clips of pads, each about 10 minutes long. So there's roughly 25 to 30 minutes of pads going on in the background, which is more than enough time. Okay, so the next musical element of the service is going to be the walkout song. And typically that's some portion of the last song from the chorus straight on to the end or some variation thereof. And just for good measure, we're going to add 10 more minutes of pads to the end. But since we already have the tempo correct and the time signature correct, we don't have to make any of those automation changes. Okay, now I'll just close up these other group tracks. Now I just got to scroll down to the bottom and find out where the actual chorus is of this song. And I can do this fairly easily by listening to the song and finding out where it actually says chorus in the guide track.
Chorus.
All right, it sounds like it's about to get
Drums
big.
in.
And it's that full chorus right there that usually we're going to use for the walkout part of the service. And just to make sure, I'm just going to go ahead and highlight all of the tracks, copy it, and paste it over at the end
Chorus.
for the walkout. Now I hit Command-C to copy it, and a good note for pasting is if you're pasting a bunch of clips from a bunch of different inputs, you're going to want to select in the top input track and paste that way by hitting Command-V. If you do it one below or one above, you'll end up having a bunch of mismatched clips with the track inputs.
Build.
Okay, and right here, since we hear the guide actually say chorus, we know that it's actually going to start 2 measures after it says chorus. So we're going to go ahead and just clip out all the end of it, and then we're going to pull the guide back just so we can make sure it still announces the chorus. Then we're going to do some custom work with vocal cues, so it counts chorus 2, 3, 4. So if we go over on the left-hand side of the screen into the vocal cues folder, we can drag the fast 2, fast 3, and fast 4 right into the input tracks on the screen and zoom in a whole bunch to make sure they're aligned appropriately. And as we're listening to it now, it sounds good coming in, but I think it needs a little bit of a fade in just to build up a little bit quicker. And it looks like I missed the fast 4 vocal cue, so I'll just drag that in real quick.
Chorus 2, 3, 4.
All right, that counter should be pretty easy to follow for the band coming into the walkout song. And now I'll just listen to make sure everything sounds fine.
Tag. Turnaround. Turnaround. Ending.
All right, so that sounds pretty good. Sounds like it's the end. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the collect all and save function, which again allows us to transport these tracks to the other campuses without having to load each of the multi-tracks individually. Collect all and save and hit OK. This takes a second, but it's super important that we remember ahead of time to save this in a new folder so that way we don't overwrite old libraries or accidental projects. All right, so that loading screen gone means it's finished, and we can just double check that it's all there by navigating to wherever we saved the file. In my case, it's an external hard drive called my name, Mlosi, in Ableton, and in the 29th, Greenwood. Okay, so here's the project I saved, and just to make sure that the collect all save function worked, we can see all the files are there. It grabbed every file that I used, copied it, and posted it in the same spot, and so now we're done. I'm going to show you how to go to the main service file that you just created and adjust it, adjust the key and whatever else you need to in order to make it work with the multi-sites and whatever the keys are there. Sometimes there's male vocalists, female vocalists, or someone who just can't sing as high or low, so we just need to make some adjustments. All right, so we're going to make a new folder in our already organized set of folders, and we're going to call it Franklin. And then inside that Franklin folder, we're going to name our project, basically the same thing, just change it to FRK and call it a day. So I have the Franklin PCO open right here, and I could just see the differences between them. Franklin's in A and Greenwood's in C. So we're just going to have to completely change the whole thing, which is not a big deal.
2. Intro 2, 3, 4.
So again, we're going to start from the bottom, click all the musical tracks or musical clips. It's already warped, so we can just bring that key down 3 semitones. And now we're just going to double check that. I'll play it real quick. And the pad will obviously be wrong, but we're going to go in and change that by deleting it and adding in a new one. Right now I'm going to go in and add it from the pads in the folder, but I could have just as easily gone and grabbed the A from further down the line since it's already brought in here. The thing I'm going to have to remember to do is deselect the warp function so it doesn't sound all squirrely and strange. But in the meantime, I'll create crossfades between them and extend it out the rest of the song. And just like before, I'm going to pull it back, create a fade out on this one, and a fade in on the next one.
Ending.
But I'm glad I checked, because before I spent too much time trying to fade in this next one, I just need to keep the same pad A going throughout both of these first two songs. So I'm just going to copy and paste the first pad throughout, again, the rest of this connecting thought into the next song. Even though I'm going through and changing the keys, all the tempos are the same, the time signatures are the same, the celebration, the gospel functions, they're all the same amount of length. It just varies by key. So I'm going to go and show you what happens when you don't warp appropriately. All sorts of strange stuff is going to happen. So I went ahead and transposed without first changing and selecting warp. So what that does is lengthen and elongate or shorten the tracks based on whether or not I go up or down in key. So it's all sorts of wacky and off key and off tempo. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Command Z, which is the universal undo button. All right, we're back to sounding nice and in tune, and everything sounds in tempo. So I'm just going to reselect everything again, and just remember to go ahead and change it to the appropriate key by hitting warp, going to the drop down, hitting complex, and then transposing. And in this instance, I'm just going to go ahead and listen to it live while transposing it, just to make sure I don't make a silly mistake. We're going to go ahead and make sure the number keys, 1 through 7, 8, or 9, whatever it happens to be, are all programmed in the right spot, as well as the pads that the drummers use to fire off the tracks. To get there, all we have to do is hit Command K to get to the key shortcuts, and Command M to get to the MIDI shortcuts. You'll know those areas are populated because in anything highlighted purple or orange, there's going to be a little number or some notation there for the MIDI or the keyboard shortcuts. And here I can see that my walkout cue is labeled 7, and if I want to add any for whatever reason, all I have to do is go up to the top, right above where the locator is, and right click and select locator, the same way I would add a time signature change. In the keyboard or MIDI programming selection mode, where everything is highlighted either purple or orange, all I have to do is select anything highlighted and then press any key or hit any MIDI note. A MIDI note could be triggered from a drum pad or a piano, but either way, to check it, just get out of the programming mode by hitting Command K or M and then firing off that keyboard shortcut, that piano note, or that drum pad and seeing if it works. And next, we're going to want to make sure that the audio interface on the output is selected correctly. So all we'll have to do is go to Live, Preferences, select the audio output device dropdown, and select the Scarlett 6i6 or whatever I'm using. In this case, I'm using a screen record. And here we're actually going to label the outputs. In this case, since I'm only using a 2-channel interface, I'm going to make the left side main, left, right, and then the right side the click and guide. And on the other side in the stereo outputs, if I have more than just 2 outputs, I can label them together and pair them as one stereo output. Okay, now we're going to set all the outputs appropriately on the track inputs. When you first load in tracks, they're all going to automatically go to the master. So whatever the master is selected at the bottom is where everything is going to go. And right now it's selected as a 1, 2. And since I don't want the click and guide to go to the master, all I'm going to do is go over to the click and guide folder, open it up, go to the routing section, select external out, which is usually the first one, and then select whichever one I want, in this case, the click and guide. I could change each of these outputs individually, or I can select each of them by holding Command and then Command clicking the folder for each of them and changing them all at one time. And since we're using the native click in Ableton, that comes out the Q track, and we're going to have to go over to the other page just to make sure we change the correct one. So I can hit tab, which brings us to clip view, go to the bottom right hand corner where it says Q out, and change that to click and guide as well. And since we've been changing all these settings while I'm listening to it live, we can hear that the click and guide is now on the right ear and the main tracks is in my left ear. Now let's say we have a bassist that isn't able to make it to service and we need the bass to come out its own specific channel. If I have more than a 4-channel interface or more than a 2-channel interface, I can set up as many as I want, and I can route all the bass tracks in Ableton to go to that output and have it go to the main front of house board. So instead of routing the group folder, I'm going to go into the actual bass channel, go to the external out, and then select the bass channel, which I just labeled. Then I'm going to go ahead and do it on each of the subsequent songs to make sure that they're all coming out that one channel. And now I'm starting to hear the bass channel come through my left ear for each of these songs. It wouldn't normally overlap with the click and guide, of course, but since I only have 2 output channels, this is all I'm doing just to demonstrate this functionality. And now that everything's done, I'm going to go ahead and collect all and save. And I can see at the top I've already saved it to the Franklin folder in the Franklin project, so I'll just go ahead and hit OK. Now it's going to load up, and when it's done, I'll be able to transfer it over to the other campuses. Then don't forget that before we do another campus, we're going to have to save live set as into another folder on our external hard drive and repeat the process.